Welcome back to the second episode of Reasonable Arguments, News and Nonsense. So, today is what? December 5th, I think it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so our last episode, we left off with, I had asked you a question, which was if a new law was passed requiring everyone to work one specific job for a year, what job would you choose for society and why?
Yeah. And I think I came up with, some level of public service, whether that's, the fire department, the police department, the military, first responder, something that gives people empathy of working with all members of the public.
Okay. And I think you asked me a question.
I did. I asked you if you could change any law
Or create.
Create a law. Snap your fingers and create a law.
Mm-hmm.
And you said...
I said, well, the one that I would want has already been done, which is the...
Cruelty to animals.
Cruelty to animals being a felony. But the next one I would want, and you and I disagree about this so much.
Oh, well, let's go get at it.
Is I think that especially male babies should have their DNA taken at birth and entered into
into
the system.
No.
Why? I mean,
you have a right to privacy.
I get the right to privacy.
So who controls that? The government? The government now has your DNA.
Listen, I don't have the specifics on how to monitor it, on how to do anything about
Absolutely
it. All I
not.
know is that 95% of crimes that are committed, murders, rapes, whatever it is done by men. And, how many, I think I've read that we've spent, I don't even know, I'd have to go back and look, millions and millions of dollars, taxpayers' dollars on these crimes that we cannot solve because their DNA is not in the system.
And it should not be in the system unless they break the law. Like, no way.
I mean...
No way.
But you're not looking at...
So what you're going to say is like, if I'm under investigation for a crime, I no longer need a judge. The police can just come in my house and search anytime they want.
If your DNA...
No. Answer that question.
What's the question again?
The question is whether a judge has not given a search warrant and the police just happen to be riding by my house and think I've committed a crime.
No, there has to be a search
so
warrant.
That's the same thing with DNA. Why are they allowed to investigate me before I'm under investigation?
They're already going to be investigating you before you're under investigation.
Not me. I haven't murdered anybody. So why does my DNA have to be in a database?
Because if you are, they're not going to start asking young men at a specific age, are you going to go out and start committing crimes? Because if you are, then we're going to take care of it. Yeah. No, this happens.
When they catch somebody committing crime and they go into the system, sure, we allow their DNA to be taken. But until then, you have a right to privacy, the end. And the fact that you just want to segregate men out of that is a complete constitutional violation.
Men commit 95% of the crimes that are murder and rape.
Complete.
It is. I mean, it's facts, though.
No, it's not.
Because you have 95%.
Yeah, the facts are on my side that the Constitution gives us a right to privacy, and you want it violated at birth. At birth, you want to violate a baby's right to privacy.
You're still going to remain private if you're not out committing crimes.
No, you won't. Because now
crimes. But now it's not private.
Now the government has my DNA, and we know that the government.
You don't think the government has your DNA right now?
The government does not legally have my DNA. And so we know that the government
legally has your DNA every time you go and give blood.
The government does not. We know that this particular administration has used the government to violate people's constitutional rights to prosecute them for political purposes. Now you're saying you want the government to have my DNA so they can plant my DNA at a crime scene and then politically prosecute me because you and I have this political podcast? No way, no way. The practical application of this is a big fail. Hashtag big fail.
Listen, I understand the practical application as far as, yes, someone can plant your DNA and all of that. Look, I have not figured that part of it out, but what I'm saying
We'll
is,
go come back completely to the drawing board.
I'll figure it out.
Go back to, and then we'll talk about this in another episode because you're off the mark here.
I'm not
completely
off the mark.
Yes, you are.
If your one of your granddaughters gets murdered, right? The guy's DNA is, and I'm going to say it's a man because I know it's a man. The guy's DNA is not in the system, and that murder goes unsolved for an entire lifetime.
That'd be horrible.
That would be horrible.
Would be.
Now, if that man had his DNA taken at the time of birth, or let's say
it's not worth violating everybody's rights to catch that one person. It's not.
Are you serious?
Dead serious. It's not worth violating everyone's rights to catch that one person.
There has to be a way that it could be.
It's the same thing, the same reason, like, we go through extraordinary efforts to require somebody to be guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, so that the hope is, and we know that this is not 100% accurate, but the hope is that we would rather let a guilty person go free than a not guilty person go to jail. And so we don't violate people's rights just so that we can help the government solve a crime. We don't do that. Like, that's why we have rights. And so we have to defend those rights. And the fact that you want to violate a baby's rights at birth,
I'm not saying
it
has
bizarre.
To be a baby, but I'm saying that there should be a time.
You started the conversation with at birth.
Well, it's just easiest then, right? It's just the easiest.
Yeah, because you're saying a baby has no rights.
I'm not saying that a baby doesn't have rights. What I'm saying is that our taxpayers' money are being used ridiculous amounts to try to solve crimes that are never going to be solved.
But we're not allowed to illegally obtain DNA from somebody, right? Like, we can't just say, oh, by the way, you're under investigation and you're compelled to give your DNA. You have to have a court order. So all the shows that we
watch where they're, drinking a Coke at the store and they
throw it away, then it's public garbage, right? And so the government can collect it. But the government can't march you into a police station and compel you to give your DNA without a court order. And so you're trying to violate the entire judicial system and the judicial branch of government.
I'm trying to save taxpayers' dollars.
You're not. You're trying to violate rights.
Okay.
That's
all right.
The ends do not.
We disagree.
The ends
do not. I just want to save money and solve crimes.
That's okay.
That's all I want.
You want to send innocent people to jail and violate the rights of babies.
I want to send the absolute guilty people to jail.
Violate at the expense of babies' rights. Okay.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. At the expense.
You're right. We're going to disagree about that. I'm going to stick up for babies on this one.
Get over the baby fact. I'm just saying, take the DNA at some point in life to avoid.
Well, this one went off the rails quick because we were going to talk about the news of the day.
Let's talk about something fun.
Yeah, so it's called News and Nonsense. I'm not sure if that was news and or nonsense, but there was some big news today that a political trial balloon was kind of released through the Wall Street Journal this week, and about Ron DeSantis becoming the Secretary of Defense if Paul Hegseth is unable to get the votes to become the defense secretary. And so that's been a huge topic in Florida because we already have.
I thought Trump didn't like DeSantis.
Well, Trump, they don't, but that's why they say politics makes strange bedfellows, right? So there's two, and I've said that Trump. What's different in Trump in 2024 that people should be welcoming versus 2020 is that he is currently practicing the politics of addition. In the past, he practiced the politics of subtraction. If you pissed him off, you're out. This time it's like, oh, Vivek Ramaswamy ran against me. Okay, let's put you together with Elon Musk and run the Department of Government Efficiency. Nikki Haley ran against me. Let's give you a prime speaking spot at the national convention. So he has continued to, whether Robert F. Kennedy Jr. ran for president, let's make you Health and Human Service Secretary. So he has continued to practice the politics of addition. I think there's a smart move by Trump. In fact, I, on a separate podcast, suggested that Ron DeSantis be offered the Secretary of the Navy. And so my guess is that people heard that and started talking about it. And now it's, he's kind of the backup plan in case Hegseth doesn't garner enough votes to get confirmed. So that'll be interesting because we already have this situation in Florida where Matt Gaetz has resigned in Congressional District 1 up in the Panhandle. Congressman Waltz is going to resign in District 6, which is St. Augustine and Flagler County. And that's going to happen around January 20th. But those special elections are already planned, and those congressional seats will be filled April 1st. Randy Fine is running in the District 6 seat, and he will have a special election for his state Senate seat because there's more than 2 years left of that term. But the interesting thing is Jimmy Patronis has resigned as CFO. And so Ron DeSantis will get to appoint that CFO position because there's less than 2 years left in the term because that seat is up in 2026. And so, of course, our friend Joe Gruters is already filed with Donald Trump's endorsement to run for CFO.
And Jimmy Patronis endorsed him.
And Jimmy Patronis endorsed him. And so he's garnering these high profile endorsements. And so while Trump doesn't like DeSantis doesn't like Gruters. Right. So I don't think I'm telling any stories out of school here. So it'll be interesting to see. And with Marco Rubio going to Secretary of State, that's going to leave a vacancy for United States Senate, which is also an appointment because that seat is up in 2026.
Who gets to decide that?
Ron DeSantis. So right now the congressional seats have to be elections. So right now, Ron DeSantis would have the appointment for U.S. Senate and for CFO. Now it gets a little bit more interesting. All these musical chairs, right? So if Ron DeSantis were to resign and take the Secretary of Defense, the Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunez becomes governor. And then she gets
by default.
Well, she's the elected lieutenant governor, so she fills the vacancy. So if he were to resign, die, take another job, whatever, she becomes the governor, and would become the first female governor of Florida.
Oh wow!
And so that you have that. So then the question becomes: does DeSantis fill these vacancies before he goes to the Secretary of Defense? Or is part of the backroom deal that's kind of all these discussions that are happening behind the scenes they're going to say, okay, if we'll give you this, but Nunez gets the appointments. Because there's also speculated that Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, Laura, would be appointed to the U.S. Senate. So, so then it's where did all these land? I've advocated that if the governor is staying put, and there's an argument.
Obviously, the Secretary of Defense is a promotion.
So that depends on how you want to look at it. It's not an elected position, but you're over a huge department, right? Like you're now a cabinet secretary, and you're, I think, 5th or 6th in line for the presidency. So I would see it as a promotion. I don't know if a governor sees that as a promotion because a governor's the position's more autonomous, where a Secretary of Defense, you're working for the president. Or you're working at the will of the president, and the president can hire you, and the president can ask for your resignation.
They were best buds at one time, so.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing is that, like Ron DeSantis doesn't become governor without Donald Trump endorsing him, so, and then, it gets more convoluted because Susie Wiles was running Ron DeSantis's first campaign at the end. She kind of came in and fixed it as it was flailing. And Joe Gruters was the party chairman who was chosen as Ron DeSantis's first Republican Party chairman. And then Ron DeSantis kind of turned on both of them. And so they both went back to Trump. And then, then you saw Ron DeSantis run for president and fail. And Donald Trump, obviously wins re-election as president. So there's a lot of these like behind the scenes moving parts that are just really kind of interesting for somebody like me. Your eyes may be glazing over. I'm not sure.
Well, I think it's, here goes the thing about politics that I probably hate the most is that, are you putting somebody in a position because you feel that they're truly deserving of it and will do a great job, or are you putting this person in a position to get what you want?
So all of these people are qualified, right? Ron DeSantis is qualified to run. He's a former Navy officer. He's a former JAG officer. He's a governor. He's run a huge department. He's dealt with crises here in the state like almost no other governor. So he's certainly qualified to run the Department of Defense, and that would make it. There's no question he's qualified, and there's no question that Lord Trump, as former co-chair for the RNC, would be qualified to be the U.S. Senate. I've advocated, however, that if Governor DeSantis is staying put, that he should appoint Joe Gruters to the U.S. Senate, because that's a Trump person, and he should appoint Trump's person to the federal office and make the deal that he gets to appoint his person to CFO. And then if he appointed Joe Gruters, it would make Joe Gruters' Senate seat also open, and it would be an appointment because there's less than 2 years left in the term. So DeSantis could make the deal that, hey, I want to appoint CFO and that state Senate seat because they're both going to be people who I have to deal with on a daily basis to run the state of Florida. But I'll send your guy up to Washington in the U.S. Senate, the guy who's been with you the longest and was the first, people don't remember that Joe Gruters was the very first Republican official to endorse Donald Trump in 2015. And he was a county party chairman at the time. And so there's a lot of loyalty there. And so you see that this would be interesting, but of course, Joe Gruters isn't going to try to take a U.S. Senate seat away from Donald Trump's daughter-in-law. So then you start getting into, well, okay, where does this deal work out? And, and then Jeanette Nunez, let's say DeSantis becomes the secretary, Jeanette Nunez becomes governor, she gets to appoint her own lieutenant governor. So there's another layer of the onion, so to speak. And so there's just kind of a wild, complete, a lot of musical chairs happening that just from, Donald Trump building his administration and using 2 members of Congress from Florida. Now, Matt Gaetz didn't make it as Attorney General, but he resigned his position as a member of Congress, so it still made the vacancy. And he's pulling a lot of people out of Florida for these major positions in the administration.
So I just had a thought, and then I was going to ask you if you wanted to do your, go Gators, whatever, since a lot of them are UF alum.
Well, they are. So we have 20 cabinet positions and 10%, both Pam Bondi and Marco Rubio are University of Florida alum. So
your face just lit up.
Awfully proud of my fellow Gators.
So you love predictions and you love all of that kind of stuff. So if you were making any of these decisions, or what is your prediction on?
So if I were making the decisions, what would I do, or what is my prediction of what will happen? Because I think those are two different things.
Let's do it. Let's do it both ways.
If
you were doing,
put me in the hot seat twice.
Yes, God, I know you hate that. You hate that.
So, I think what could happen is,
if you were in charge, what would you do?
I think you try to get Ron DeSantis to become the Secretary of Defense. I think that makes a lot of sense for the president. I think it makes a lot of sense for the governor, and I think it makes a lot of sense for the country. It makes a lot of sense. So then, should that happen, then you have.
You're only going top level.
No, I'm going to the next one too.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So then we have the open CFO, and you appoint Joe Gruters to the CFO. You appoint Larry Trump to the U.S. Senate seat, and Jeanette Nunez would appoint. That herein lies the question: who would she appoint lieutenant governor? Because you would think that would be, she's from Miami, so you would think that she would want to solidify, her position as the incumbent governor when she's running for re-election. So she wants to pick somebody who's going to help her win re-election. So
is that like a Rick Scott thing? I don't know.
Okay, so Rick Scott's in the U.S. Senate, just ran and won. He has 6 more years. So Rick Scott's not on the ballot again until 2030.
Okay.
So you would think that she would pick somebody from Tampa or Orlando because that I-4 corridor in a Republican primary, along with, Miami-Dade and Broward are big deals in a Republican primary just because the number of people are there. But she's from that corner of the world. So you would think she would pick somebody either from like a Southwest Florida where there's a large Republican base, or Tampa or Orlando where you have a huge media market, right?
So if you were her, who would you pick?
Boy, I'm trying to think of who I would think would be the most popular, politician in that realm. So let's put that on the list for another day because that's really not. I'm not sure
Okay.
who I want to say that she's going to predict there. Now, assuming that Ron DeSantis does not.
We're doing predictions.
Yeah. Okay. So assuming that Ron DeSantis doesn't become the Secretary of Defense and stays governor, I think he should, if he's going to appoint Larry Trump as the U.S. Senator, his real choice there, and it's really going to look self-serving, is for him to appoint himself to the U.S. Senate. Because if he's going to...
Can he do that?
He can. So
Has anybody done that?
Not sure, but it would be seen as in bad form.
Right.
And so, but if DeSantis isn't going to build a coalition with Donald Trump for whatever reason, either Donald Trump doesn't allow it or whatever, they're going to continue to have this battle or this feud between the two of them. Ron DeSantis does not have a path after 2026 without Donald Trump unless he appoints himself to the U.S. Senate. He just simply doesn't have a path. And so, because the election is not until 28 for president, he would have to kind of have some donors set up a think tank and him try to stay relevant through a think tank while J.D. Vance is being the incumbent vice president of the United States. So it just becomes really hard for him and Ron DeSantis is 43 years old. So it's one of those times, I don't want to say it's not his time because he's qualified to be president. So I'm not going to say, oh, he needs to cool his jets or anything like that, because I don't believe that's the case. If you feel like you can be president and the timing is right, you should try it. And however, he has a tough path if he doesn't kind of have peace with Donald Trump, at some level. And so he has this huge opportunity to create a coalition with Donald Trump. And the interesting thing is he ran his entire presidential campaign being the second choice to Trump voters. Before J.D. Vance was picked as vice president, Ron DeSantis was still the second choice for Trump voters. Now it's a little bit different, but every poll had Ron DeSantis as, if Donald Trump wasn't on the ballot, Ron DeSantis would have won 70% of Trump's voters. And so, so he's run this campaign where it makes sense for him to build a coalition and to practice the politics of addition, right? And say, hey, I want to be part of the team. We run this winning team here in Florida. Let's do this together nationally. And there's just so many reasons for them to do that. But I don't think he's going to. I'm not going to predict that he's going to appoint himself to the U.S. Senate. So now if he stays governor, your choice is either feud or bend to the president's will. So if you bend to the president's will, you appoint Laura Trump to U.S. Senate, you appoint Joe Gruters to CFO, and you call it a day. And you ask Joe to be part of the team in the cabinet. And I think Joe Gruters would be like, hey, listen, if you're going to appoint me, let's go have these final 2 years together and do a good job together. Right. And I really think that about Joe Gruters. And I think that about Ron DeSantis, if they decided to go that way. And
so did you actually say your predictions, or did you just throw out scenarios? Because I don't think I heard your actual predictions.
I don't want to predict. It means so much, right? That it's a pivotal moment for Ron DeSantis and his future. And, and I don't want to predict that he's going to do what I think is the wrong thing, which is continue to feud with the president. And so, my hope is, and I think that we'll realize that his best path, if in fact the offer is real for the defense secretary, that he goes through that path. And we have this kind of musical chairs in Florida. And I had a reporter ask me yesterday, a Miami Herald reporter asked me, what happens? What kind of power vacuum does Florida have if Ron DeSantis goes to, and I was like, we have a little power vacuum, but we've had a foundation of 26 years of a Republican governor, Republican House, and Republican Senate. 26 running years, and a majority Republican on our cabinet. So we have this foundation of a conservative government, which is why so many people look at Florida as the kind of the city on the hill, so to speak, of conservative government. And so yeah, people will fill that void, and it'll be fine because the foundation is so secure. We've just had great governors and leaders, speakers of the House, Senate presidents. I won't go into naming them all, but who have established Florida as this beachhead of conservatism for our country. And so, while I think there'd be a little bit of jockeying, for the most part, I think we'll have, Jeanette Nunez would step into the role and fill the vacuum along with the Speaker of the House and the Senate President, and Florida will be fine.
Okay. So any more about that?
I don't think so, unless you have some more questions.
I don't. Not for that. So the pardon, Biden's pardon to Hunter.
Yeah, so this is going to be politically, if not legally, ground shaking for a long time, maybe decades, because it covers not only, usually somebody gets pardoned for, hey, you did this, you're not going to jail for that, right? This is, you get pardoned for a period of 11 years, which includes a big chunk of the time period when Joe Biden was vice president, and for crimes known and unknown. And so, it's pretty apparent that this is more of a cover up and not just a dad trying to help his son stay out of jail. I think there's a lot of people. Geraldo Rivera had a tweet like, of course you're going to keep, I would pardon my sons, right? Like I would pardon my son. I would do everything I can to keep my sons out of jail.
What was the thing the whole time where he was never going to do it?
Well, therein lies the hypocrisy, right? And that's what his legacy is going to be remembered. That is going to be Joe Biden's legacy, because he was hypocritical, not only on this, but many, many issues. He had this hypocrisy, whether it was energy policy or DEI or the open border, or, like they tried to say this last fall going into the campaign that there were more border crossings under Trump than Biden, which is a bold-faced lie. And so they just tried to lie their way to an election win, and that's going to end up being Joe Biden's legacy. And fortunately or unfortunately, he had a long legacy in D.C., but his legacy was really of not doing much.
Did you see him fall asleep at the meeting?
I did not.
Of him sleeping.
No, I did not.
It was like the energy meeting or something. He's sitting there with his
how ironic that he fell asleep at the energy meeting. Yeah, that's funny.
Sound asleep.
No, I was at a conference over in Orlando, so I missed that. But
I'll show you the video.
So yeah, what are your thoughts on the pardon?
I think he's just to the point where he just doesn't even give a shit anymore.
Right.
It's like, it's over. It's, he's succumbed to all of everything that happened. And he's just, it's kind of like when you quit a job and you just, you have a month or two to go.
Put like 2 weeks notice, and I'm 1 week.
I'm done. I'm going to fall asleep at meetings. I'm just going to sign off on shit that who cares who has to deal with it down the road. I think it's almost kind of that type of thing with him. He just doesn't, he's done.
He's
just cooked
duck.
And he's just cooked and done. But no, I think, I don't know. The whole thing is just kind of head shaking.
The head
not
shaking
surprising,
part, the head shaking, not surprising. The head shaking part is the period of time, how far it goes back. It goes back to when he was vice president of the United States, And it certainly gives the appearance that he's pardoning his son for crimes that he himself committed.
Yeah.
And that's the sad part about it. And, and we all kind of know that they were influence peddling, to foreign countries.
So would
And
this have been a non-issue if he would have stayed president and won, or if Kamala would have won?
no, if he had stayed president, he maybe would have. Listen, part of Hunter Biden was going to jail. They created this sweetheart deal, and this is the other hypocrisy, the hypocritical thing about the pardon. He's like, "Well, my son was singled out for political purposes," and it's funny that Joe Biden is talking about the Department of Justice having a political indictment when that's what he's used the Department of Justice for his entire time in office. And so, so it's very hypocritical, and people, let's not revise history. His son had a very sweetheart deal that you and I would not have gotten, where he would not have done jail time. And when the public found out about that, the uproar was so great that they had to withdraw the deal. And so he was going to go to jail for these crimes, these gun crimes, and so so his dad pardoned him for this. But did he need to go back to time when like the 30 or 60 days before we know that Hunter Biden was influence peddling and calling someone the big guy, and I'll get the big guy to do this and I'll get the big guy to do that if you pay me, right? And so we know that we all know that they broke the law. They both were there. They both broke the law. This pardon is to help protect Joe Biden's legacy, and I think it actually taints it.
Okay. All right. So is that all you have about politics today?
That's enough. I think we've probably running into our time buffer. I don't know where we are.
Time for nonsense.
Yeah, no, I was just saying it's time to move on to nonsense,
It
baby.
is time to
yeah, let's move on.
So my story today is about the ambulance in Oregon that ran over cyclists and then billed them for the ambulance trip to the hospital.
I have not heard about this.
Yeah. So
an ambulance hits a bicyclist.
Yeah. So a bicyclist is going down the road. They're claiming probably about 5 to 10 miles per hour. Here comes a turn, right?
Yeah.
And so the bicyclist is actually moving faster than the ambulance. And the ambulance's lights aren't on. They're saying he's going about 2 to 5 miles per hour. And whether he didn't see the cyclist, makes a right turn in front of him and runs them over. They didn't even know until they felt the bump. And they get out, and here's the man, and they rush him to the hospital. So the man that got hit is now suing because he filed a $997,000 lawsuit against the ambulance provider after it scooped him up, drove him to the hospital, and then billed him for the service. They charged him, I think, $1,862 for the bill. And this gentleman is now he has almost over $50,000 in medical costs.
Well, is he going to be okay?
He's going to be okay, and hopefully a lot richer, right?
Yeah.
But then it comes up where the person who wrote the story then goes into, they're now fighting it because they're thinking that his basically car insurance should cover the accident because he was on his bike. But yeah. So anyway, so then they start digging into other news stories about ambulances in Oregon hitting people. And there's been at least 3 of them where they've actually hit people and have killed them. So I don't know who's driving ambulances in Oregon. I mean, it's obviously not the same place, but there has been, and now my news,
that's
my
crazy
news stories keeping them out. But there was one where, again, they cut in front of a girl and ended up killing her. So the family filed, I don't even know what the millions, the millions dollars. And then there was another one where someone was off to the side of the road and with a flat tire, and they drove by and hit her and killed her.
That's incredible. Ladies and gentlemen, do not go to Oregon and be near an ambulance.
Yeah.
Like they should put beepers on them. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, is that not insane?
that
This
is,
poor guy,
he gets billed
they charged him.
$50,000 for medical
course they
expenses
charged
and
him.
almost $2,000 for the ride, for the honor of taking him to the hospital after they hit him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just
Like, would
insane.
you like honestly, if you were cognizant enough, let's say you're not desperate, right?
Mhm.
Would you ask for a different ambulance to take you? Like, no, I'm not.
Well,
not
that's-
I mean, think about it. Like, they just ran you over.
Yeah. No,
Would
that's
you,
actually.
would you say, no, I want a different ambulance? Because I don't trust your driving.
Yeah, I don't trust you at all. That's actually a very good point. I think
mean-
I'd have to call like 911 and be like,
no,
please.
I'm not going with these
get
guys.
me an Uber.
That's right. I'm not going with these
Be
guys.
cheaper going an Uber and safer probably.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my God.
Oh,
All
my
right.
goodness.
Well, I think so. Do you have any questions for next week other than
No, I'd love to hear from the audience and ask them what their predictions are for what they think are these musical chairs are going to be and who's going to land in them. Like,
Yeah.
it's really pretty exciting, when you have two members of, who, I've been involved at least as long as Marco, and from before Pam, and now they're members of the president's cabinet. It's pretty exciting to have friends who you've worked with over decades
that's awesome.
become so influential in our government. It's and for those two in particular, it is well deserved, and they're both going to shine in those positions of Secretary of State and Attorney General. So I'm really excited for Marco and Pam.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess that's it for this episode of.
Well, one thing we might want to ask people is how often they want to hear from us. Do they want to hear from us once a week, 3 times a week? 5 would be kind of ambitious.
Yeah, Lord.
5 is a little ambitious, but
is it ambitious?
It might be. I don't know. We'd probably have to get up earlier than I want to do 5 days a week, but we could probably try to do a 7 to 8 live show. If
Oh, now you want to go live again?
Oh, we could. I guess I forgot that we're not doing this live.
Yeah.
So yeah, we could talk about the news of the day, and I think the other thing we're trying to grapple with the show is whether or not we have guests, and whether
we should definitely have guests.
Yeah. So, we've had some people offer to be guests, and which is very exciting because that means, number one, they're listening. So thank you all for listening. And number two, they're interested in what we have to say so much that they want to participate in it. Right.
Are they going to appreciate my nonsense stories?
I think they're especially going to appreciate your nonsense stories. Yeah. Like, everybody's going to love your nonsense stories. They've all heard from me for years. So they're like you. They're tired of hearing. We need new listeners that aren't tired of listening.
Well,
tired of hearing me.
Then let's get some people commenting or asking questions or letting us know what they want to talk or hear us talk about, I guess.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants to join the conversation, we can definitely have that.
And we put this together, I don't want to say pretty quickly, but we did put this together pretty quickly because I've had 3 news reporters in the last 24 hours ask me about the musical chairs in Florida. And so why not also, I certainly grant those interviews, but why not create a podcast around that? So if there's breaking news and you want us to, hear what we have to say about it, feel free to shoot us a text, certainly on Facebook, our Reasonable Arguments Podcast Facebook page.
To Spotify.
Everything. We watch all those comments and we answer all of them. So we look forward to hearing from you.
So where is our podcast now? We're on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music,
iHeart,
Pandora, iHeart, and of course we have our website on Podbean, which we can put out, and Facebook.
And we put the YouTube link on Facebook, right? Is that how we're doing it?
No, we do it through Podbean. Podbean posts.
And do we put it on Rumble? Rumble has to be video.
That I do not, but we can figure that out. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we're going to be on all those places. And then we posted on Twitter and LinkedIn and our personal Facebook pages. Yeah. So we're pretty easy to find.
We're easy to find.
Pretty easy to find.
All right. So that is the conclusion of episode 2 of Reasonable Arguments, News and Nonsense. We will see you next time. So keep your arguments reasonable and your nonsense fun.